Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
People stay in abusive relationships for so many reasons. To be the fixer, to make them be who we think they can, and the person always fixated on the happier times. These are not reasons to stay.
Hello, you guys, and welcome back. This is True Crime Connections Advocacy Podcast. I'm Tiffany, your host. I want to welcome you here if this is your first time. If you are coming back, welcome back to your rewired and inspired community. Before we do get into it, though, I do want to give a shout out to CF15403. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out who you are. I do not know, but I want to thank you so much for the very kind Apple review that you left for the podcast. So I had to get that out of the way. All right. So this week, we are learning how to look at different perspectives and to get a better understanding through an abuse survivor's lens. What is it really like to go through it, to come out better and stronger on the other side? Joining me this week is LaShaudra Barnes. She's a mother, another podcast host, and a survivor. So thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I resonated with your story for sure. So this happened when you were in high school. Oh my gosh, so young.
The abuse didn't happen. I met my abuser when I was in high school. Yeah, we met when we were kids. And then years later, we reconnected, had kids together. And then the abuse happened when we reconnected around the time like I was in college.
Okay. One of the gradual ones.
Yeah.
So where did you want to begin with your story? I don't know if you wanted to go back to childhood or it's up to you. Put the ball in your court there.
Yeah, I can go back to childhood. So when I was a child, I was very reserved, kind of to myself. I remember my parents used to fight a lot, and they actually got divorced around like middle school for me, between 6th and 7th grade. And I just remember being so happy because like all the fighting stopped and it was just a lot of traumatic things going on. And I just remember crying a lot. And when my dad left, like all the fighting stopped and most kids would be devastated, but I was actually happy because there was finally peace, you know? And so I met my first boyfriend when I was a junior in high school. And he's the one that years later became, like I said, the father of all 3 of my kids. And then he's now my former abuser. So we met, were together briefly, and then he moved to another state and we kind of like lost communication. And I never, I guess, had closure from that. So all throughout the years after that, I was trying to like recreate what we had with other people, but it never seemed to work. And then we reconnected when I was in college and we had our first son. He already had a child by someone else as well. And then in that relationship, it was gradual, like you said. It didn't start out as physical at all. And so that's why I didn't think anything was wrong. It was majority like mental and emotional abuse, a lot of manipulation, control, kind of hovering. And so that's kind of how it started. And I would say like for 95% of the relationship, that's what it was. It didn't get physical until the very end. And throughout the entire relationship, I had experienced mental and emotional abuse, some financial abuse, verbal abuse. And then, like I said, at the very end, it became extremely toxic and deadly and it got physical. And that's right before I left.
Good for you for finally leaving when it got to that point. I think, God, do we not make so many excuses for these people? I mean, it's so many. It's maybe I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that, or I was 5 minutes late. How dare I? But I was behind a bus, or, it's just little things like that. But these are not things that we need to be sorry for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I ignored all the red flags being in that situation because I wanted so badly for it to work. I didn't want to be like my parents. I didn't want to separate the family. My kids were like 2, 3, and 4. Like they were really young at the time. Just the idea of starting over with nothing, being a single mother overnight and having all these kids and then just healing from all that while they were healing because they experienced trauma and things like that. Hard. And there were a lot of barriers for me that kept me in that situation. But yeah, I made those excuses. I ignored like wise counsel, people that came to me and say, hey, this guy's not it, And I just thought to myself, well, I'm not like you. I'm not going to be like you. That doesn't apply to me. I ignored that too. And just every red flag, even that inner feeling like something wasn't right, like the whole time, I just ignored that, until it got to the very last point where it's like, okay, I have to either choose life or death. I have to choose. For me, I'm a woman of God. I have to choose Jesus Christ or I have to choose this man. And so I had to pick God at the end of the day because someone was going to die, in my opinion. That's how bad it got.
Wow, that's a scary place to be too, especially when you have children, because some of these abusers, they won't just stop with you too. They'll move on to the children. So you really have to be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a scary part as well, because I almost lost the kids in the process and I didn't even know, but just going back, like, cause DCFS got involved and stuff like that, of course. And just going back, reading the paperwork, I'm like, wow, if I wouldn't have left him, they would have taken my kids. And I didn't even know, like being in the midst of it, that was what was about to happen.
Wow. Were they going to give them to him?
No, they were going to take them into custody. Like they were going to take them because he couldn't have them because they knew he struggled, a lot with mental health and stuff like that. He wasn't in the best state. And then plus with the abuse, they weren't going to give them to him. And then with me, it was like, okay, well, if you're putting them in a dangerous environment and you're not leaving that, they can't be with you either. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. Like, if you're not making good decisions for your kids and you're putting them in danger, then you can get your kids taken away as well.
That is an amazing point to make. Absolutely. Because in a way, you're neglecting their needs because you're dealing with the bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. And they can't make the decision for themselves. So, even though you're not the one doing the abuse, but putting them in that environment, could still cause them to get taken away from you. Yeah. So that was really hard.
Right. I think it's so easy to get caught up in this because, like you said, you wanted this so bad. Like in your eyes, this is probably like your second chance of love with this person. And you're like, nothing's going to break us up this time. Nobody's moving. I got them back. We're going to be happy. And then happily ever after doesn't always work. But we want to make that person the person we want them to be. And we can't make that for them. They have to want to be that person. And that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I said. Like, I was holding on to that person over the years I met in high school, but I didn't realize he had went through so much stuff, so much trauma, so much abuse, neglect. I didn't even know when I met him, but even after he left, he went through more. And I didn't know how that impacted him, mentally, emotionally. And I was holding on to that person because he was so kind. He was such a gentleman. He was so mature. I was like a year older than him. He was more mature than the guys in my grade. I'm like, oh, like I just held on to that person I knew from high school instead of accepting like who he was showing me he was in, that present time. And so I think that's one of the barriers in addition that really kept me holding on, saying, no, this has to work. We used to write letters to each other and stuff, like had plans of getting married and all this stuff. Like it has to work. But it just got ridiculous to the point where I'm like, it's not even worth it anymore.
Well, there comes to be a point where you wake up one day and you're like, what in the actual hell am I doing? Hey, yeah. I've been there myself a few times and it's just like, no, we're not doing this anymore. Like, this isn't love. You have the love for that person. They claim they have the love for you. Whether sometimes they do or don't, I always question that. I'm like, if you love somebody like that, how do you treat them like that? How do you knock them down constantly? How do you try to control somebody's whole life if you love them? Why wouldn't you let them be free?
Mm-hmm. Right. And a lot of times I think that they weren't properly loved, and that was possibly the model of love that they had, and that's all that they know how to do. Because a lot of times people who are abused and neglected in their lives, they become abusers too, and they think it's love because that's what their mom or dad or excuse me, whoever was in their life did to them. But they might even know that it's wrong and it's not okay, but it's like it's so ingrained in them, like it becomes a part of them, and they end up doing the same things.
Did you ever bring up like counseling or anything like that?
Yeah. So after leaving, well, I wouldn't say after leaving, after like a physical altercation, I guess you would say, towards the end, that we had a physical fight. I actually, no, let me go back. There was a day that I had went to the grocery store with him, and it's a whole story, but he was running around the store with the kids this day. And for some reason, I had like a lot of anxiety. I didn't feel like myself. I didn't want to be in the store. I just want to kind of get in and get out. But he was drawing like all this attention to us. Like he was being obnoxious, running around with all three of the kids screaming and yelling in the store. And I'm like, hey, can you like be quiet so we could just get our stuff and leave? And of course, he did what he wanted to do. I questioned him about it when we got home. Mind you, when I was in the store, like I had this thought, I was looking at everyone like passing us by, right? And I felt like, I didn't say anything, but I felt like they were looking at me like I was crazy. And it's probably because like, however I felt on the inside, you could see it on my face. I don't know how I was looking, but people were looking at me like, this is what I thought, like I was crazy. So we get home and I questioned him about it. Why did you do that? I didn't feel well. I didn't want people looking at us. I just wanted to, how you get anxious and you don't want to be around people. That's how I felt. And so he said that me and the kids were in the store having fun. Everyone was looking at you like you were crazy. Right. And in that moment, I kind of like snapped, and I don't know. And I never told him anything about what I was thinking in the store. But when he said that, I felt like maybe he was right. Like I was crazy, like something was wrong. And so in that situation, he had some pills, a bottle of pills. I had threw them all over the kitchen, and I was about to commit suicide. And from that point, I didn't swallow anything or whatever the medics were called. But from that point, I went to the emergency room, and then they linked me up finally with services. And I went to like an intensive outpatient therapy group. It's like you go 4 days a week. You're there 4 hours a day. You even eat lunch there. You just go to groups all day. And that's kind of like my first experience with therapy, which the incredible thing is the whole time, like I was in the therapy, I never once like mentioned what was going on at home or mentioned him or anything. I talked about everything else but him because, he was still living with me. So, but I didn't mention it until the very end when the therapy was up. But yeah, like that was my first experience with therapy. And it was after like he made me feel so crazy, and I was about to commit suicide. And so after that, leaving that situation, even with my kids, leaving the relationship, over the years, we've been in and out of therapy and counseling. That's been a part of our like healing journey. We all were healing at the same time. They've witnessed things and experienced things, and me as well. And we've been through stuff individually, but also together as a family. So we all were healing at one point.
That's good. It's important. You have to be able to talk about these things. And just think maybe how much more you could have grown if you would have told them what was going on. But I get that. I do. Because you're like, that's my little dirty secret. I don't want out, but I need help. So I get it.
And the funny thing is, like every day at group, they would say like these certain rules or whatever of group. And one of the things they would say is to be honest, like with the group, and be honest with yourself. Like basically don't withhold things. And I'm like, yep, I'm being honest.
I'm crying.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was a difficult experience. And I forgot to mention, like when I got to the emergency room, he shows up like maybe an hour later with the kids. And one of the things he told me was to not tell my family and not to tell anybody like about that situation. He wanted me to be quiet, and I didn't tell anyone. And honestly, I didn't say anything until like last year. This happened back in 2017. When I left him, I held on to that, and I didn't share that with anyone until last year in 2023. Yeah. And I don't know why, like he just would say things and convince me to, not include people. And I think that's a red flag in another way for abusers to maintain power and control, because the less people that know what's going on, the less people that you have in your ear telling you things, offering you support, letting you know that, hey, you don't deserve that. They're losing power and control over you. The more people you have, the more support you have, so.
110%. Because that's one of mine. You used to always say, that's all you do. Chirp, 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 chirp. And he's like, you tell people our problems and that's why this and that. And it's like, no, I need to know that I'm not crazy, because I too was always told that I was crazy. And guess what? I was right every damn time. So no, I wasn't crazy. You have to tell somebody, because God forbid if something would have happened, somebody needs to really know what's going on at home. Somebody. If you don't want to tell a person, write it in a journal, put it somewhere so people will get an insight of what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I used to do as well. Journal a lot. Journal. I don't know where my old ones went, but I do have a few, and I would go back and read them and just look at everything that I was going through. I'm like, wow. Sometimes it's hard to do that, but it's also a blessing, I feel like, because it just shows you how far you've come and, just all the dark, crazy things you experience. Like I had 2 near-death experiences in that relationship. Like, I felt like I was about to die. Literally, I felt life was slipping away. But to still be here and to look back on that, what God has brought me through, it's like, I'm just grateful to be here, and that my kids are here with me, and I still am in my right mind, because I could have, fell off the deep end. You know what I mean? But I'm thankful to God that He's allowing me to speak and share and everything. And I'm not severely mentally ill or hospitalized or anything. Like, He's kept me this whole time.
Right. I say that a lot also about like the journaling, because once you do get past that and you do, like, you go back, number one, the reflection, holy crap. You're like, because you will forget some of this stuff because your body and your mind is trying to protect you. So you start reading it and your jaw is on the floor. And you're like, oh my God. But it's also empowering to know you got past it.
Yeah. Yeah. Journaling has helped me a lot. I do recommend to your audience, like, start journaling, because it's very therapeutic. And then not just to write, but revisit those old journals and just see how far, like, you've grown and matured and how far you've come. It's very therapeutic.
Absolutely. So you have a podcast called Her Desired Haven podcast.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Is it about survivors as well, or what do you talk about on there?
Yeah. So on my podcast, it's all things Jesus, family, life, and faith. It's like a Christian podcast. And I do share a lot about my testimony, but I also bring on other people who want to share their stories as well, and how, like, experts who offer, education on their journeys as well. I enjoyed doing it. I would say that I really got serious about it this year, even though I started back in 2022. But yeah, it's a journey and it's been fun.
No, it is. It's great. You get to meet amazing people. Like, I get to meet you. So you get to see people where they are now. You get to hear where they've come from, because it's so important. You can watch TV and you're like, this is a TV show. Like, this isn't real. But like, these are real people's lives. This is what people really went through. And this is where they really are today. And that is so empowering, because people who feel stuck, like they can't leave, or what's my life going to be like after? There is life after abuse, people. There really is. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. And that's what I kind of like to use the platform for as well, to not just educate people about, like, abuse and domestic violence, but different things too, like parenting. I have 2 children that are neurodiverse, meaning they learn and process and do things differently than the average child. Being single mother, just we dive in on different topics as well. But I really enjoy it. It allows me to meet really interesting people as well, and then to share that there is life after abuse. Like, this is not and I always say this is not the end of your story. Like, I'm surviving and thriving in life after abuse. After I left that situation, I went back to school, got my bachelor's degree. I am an entrepreneur. I started my podcast. I am serving my community as a children's ministry teacher. And I'm also a commissioner on a board. So it's like, in all
Look at you.
Yes, all the amazing things that God has done and that he's still going to do in the future. It's like, that's not the end of your story. It's a small chapter of a bigger book, right? That's just one chapter, but there's so much more left.
Absolutely. If you could go back, what do you think would be like your defining moment where you would have been like, something's wrong. Like this is weird. This is not it.
Mm-hmm. I would say the first time that I witnessed him having like a psychotic break. I remember when I was in college, and we were in a long distance relationship at one point. So I took a plane to go visit him, and he was having like a psychotic break. And it wasn't like you would think it's like violent or something like that. That's not what it was. He just couldn't like eat, couldn't talk. He was pacing back and forth for hours, and he just looked so weak. That's what it was. It wasn't like violent or anything. And so it was weird, but you would think that would scare me away. And I'd be like, because it was strange. Like he told me he struggled, but I never knew that it was like that. And you would think, okay, that's it. I'm done at this point. But something in me was like, you know what? I could really take care of him. Like, I want to be there for him. I'm going to take care of him, stuff like that, which is weird. But I would think in that moment, I could have easily walked away. And the crazy thing is, this is the crazy thing. Okay. The crazy thing is, on the way, like, I went through so much to get there. I kid you not. Like, I think I took like a bus. The bus was like an hour late, and then I almost missed the plane. It was like so many things trying to stop me. Now that I look back, trying to stop me from getting there. And I still was like I have to get there. You know what I mean? And then I ended up, with my first son. So after that, yeah. So, which he's a blessing.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you're happy for that, but the universe is like, don't you go there.
Exactly. Looking back, I'm like, there was so much. I kid you not. The bus was like, and the crazy thing is, I showed up like 2 hours earlier than when I was supposed to leave, like extra early. I was still late. It was like, there's so much. If I was just paying attention and stop being, just so focused on intent on getting there and slow down and be like, okay, there's a reason why this bus is this late and I came super early. There's a reason why I'm about to miss this plane. There's a reason why all this stuff is happening, yet I'm still trying to get there. So I will say, start paying attention when things are not, there's barriers. Sometimes there's barriers and it's just, blocking you from doing what you need to do. But sometimes there's barriers that is like trying to protect you. For me, it's like God trying to protect me and get me to slow down and talk to him and see, okay, what's going on? Is this something I need to pay attention to? So pay attention, because the signs they're always there, but we just are so laser focused on what we want to do.
For sure. I mean, right now you're getting upset. You're like, I'm just trying to get to his house. Like, I don't understand what is going on. But when you look back at it, you're like, shit, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you guys ever get married, or you just dated?
No. So we were in a relationship for 5 years. We were engaged for 3, never got married. No, we were supposed to, never got married. And so, which I'm glad we didn't, because that wouldn't have been good. But yeah, we never got married. And the amazing thing is, like, we were supposed to go to the courthouse, and for some reason that the night before, he stayed up all night. Like, I don't think he went to sleep. I don't know what was going on with him. He just, but he would not, the day we were supposed to go, like, get married, go to the courthouse, he wouldn't leave the house. Like, he wouldn't wake up. And so once again, that was another, thing standing in the way, because I really genuinely believed that God did not want me to marry him, And so I'm grateful that we didn't, for sure.
It's a lot harder to walk away.
Yeah, exactly.
Does he have contact with the children? Are you guys like amicable now, or is it still like you need to stay over there?
Yeah. So I had got like it's called an order of protection or like a restraining order. So right after we left, that was in place for like 4 years. So he hadn't communicated with us for 4 years. They just reconnected back in 2021 and kind of are like rebuilding that trust and that relationship again. For me, I'm grateful that I've reached a space of peace and forgiveness. I've forgiven him. Like I don't have any negative emotions, feelings, anything towards him. I'm so grateful for that because there were a lot of times where I would easily get triggered and stuff like that. That doesn't happen anymore. I want people to understand that I've completely forgiven him, even though he's done some very bad things to me and my kids witnessed him do bad things to me, but they still are also witnessing, okay, even though he's done that, I still see that mom forgave him and she can talk to him, because he's still the father of all of my kids. So we gotta, still do what we need to do for our kids. We won't be together ever again, but we can be cordial. We can, get along and be kind to one another and do what we need to do for our children. So he's in their life still long distance. He's not, in the same state as us, but they still are able to talk to and communicate with them. And I would say that their relationship has gotten much better.
That's good. It's important. One of mine was also my child's father. So they have been trying to repair that for quite some time as well. It's a slow process, but forgiveness, it is so important. And it's really not even for that other person. It's for yourself. Because some people are like, I'm not forgiving him. He doesn't deserve it. It ain't about that person. It's about you. Do you want to live in that anger and in that dark place?
Yeah.
Or do you just want to shine the light on what it was and walk out that door and just keep living your life? And earlier you said you were silly because you're like, I could take care of him. And no, honey, we are all that way. We want to fix them. There is no fixing.
Yeah. And that's the thing though. I like when I was in that situation, I remember my pastor's wife saying, that's not your job. She literally told me that. And I was just like, okay, but it wasn't because he needed more help than I can give. Like he needed like professional, like just therapeutic. He needed way more help than I could give. And I didn't understand that, but I was literally, it became so overwhelming, so draining, being in that situation. And even though I was with him, I still felt like a single parent because like I was doing everything.
Been there. Yep. You're like, if I'm going to be alone, I'd rather be alone, not with a body, but still alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm so proud of where you have come. I think you are doing amazing things.
Thank you.
Keep shining your light. Is there anything else you want like the listeners to know?
Yes. So if you could take away anything from my story, it would be that your life matters and that you should never be ashamed to tell your story. Another thing would be to not ignore the red flags in relationships because abuse can come in so many different forms. For me, it was not physical. For a lot of people, it doesn't start off that way, but it ends that way. So definitely pay attention to those red flags. Another thing would be that sometimes therapy is necessary. And I think it's important for us to get that professional help that we need so that we can really be able to survive and thrive in life after abuse. Because like we said, this is not the end of your story and there is life after abuse. The last thing would be that Jesus loves you and he sees you. He desires you. He doesn't desire you to be abused, to be harmed. And we just have to make a decision. Like I said, for me, it was life or death. It was God or this man because the man in marriage had become an idol in my life. I had to surrender that. And God desires us to repent, to surrender so that nothing else comes before him. And we have to not just look to a man or a person or our job or ourselves as the source, but look to God as our source so that we won't be so bound to a person thinking that you need to be here, you need to stay there and that you can't do anything without them or whatever the case may be. So that's my advice for your listeners. And I pray that this is a blessing to someone and that you stay encouraged because there is hope.
Absolutely. And I love what you said. Like, there is so much power in sharing your story.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are you helping other people realize what they are probably in, because we like to make them excuses. We like to wear our shades. So we're not seeing the truth, but it's there and it's not going to go away. No matter how many excuses you make, no matter how many pairs of glasses you want to put on, it is what it is. So especially if somebody who's listening, if you know somebody who needs to hear this episode, share it with them. It's empowering. And people need to realize there's so much life on the other side. Like, get your life back. You deserve it. I don't care if you're a man, if you're a woman, abuse is not okay. And you deserve better.
Agreed.
Yes. So if people want to come and find you, what is the best way? Is your podcast on all platforms? Do you have a website?
Yes, I am on all platforms. The main platform right now I'm focused on is YouTube. So if you just look up Her Desired Haven, you can find me there. And yeah, I think that's the main one. I do have a website. It's herdesiredhaven.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, then I'm going to thank you so much for being here. I'm going to thank everybody for listening. Again, if this resonates with you or you know somebody who's going through it, please share it with them. Let's heal the world as much as we possibly can. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for giving me the space, to be able to tell my story. I really appreciate it as well.
So important. So important. My pleasure.